Next speaker is Professor Jim Hill. Again, another great colleague going back decades. I'm not going to tell him the spillage story, Jim, so you can relax about that. He's at the University of Colorado. He's going to talk about energy balance. Jim?
Thank you, Steve, and it's a pleasure to be here. See a lot of old friends in the audience. I have 10 minutes to tell you why you should be concerned about energy balance, okay? So here's a schematic of the energy balance system. I'm not here to convince you that energy balance is how the body regulates weight. If you don't believe that, we'll talk about gravity and whether you believe in that or not. I'm here to tell you that in understanding energy balance, we're going to understand potentially ways that we can more effectively address obesity. So I show this cartoon about energy balance. It looks pretty simple. Energy intake, energy expenditure, body stores. You can actually make it much more complex. I can show you in the brain all this regulatory systems. The science these days is beautifully describing how this system is regulated. Okay, there are very few of my colleagues who don't believe in energy balance, a few, and we'll talk about that later. But I think most people don't really understand the implications of energy balance. And that's what I wanted to talk about today, is will an understanding and appreciation of energy balance help us better address obesity? So this system is certainly influenced by inherited factors. Look around the room. We all look different. A lot of that difference are due to genetics. Genetics plays a role. But behavior also plays a role. Eating, activity, sleep, and the environment plays a role. And I'm going to argue that obesity is an adaptation to our environment. Our physiology is working just fine in obesity. Nothing's broken. It's the environment that's broken. And so when we look at this system, a couple of things to point out. These factors are not independent. If you change any one thing, if you change energy intake, everything else changes. And where we make a mistake is we do our studies and we only look at one or two things. If we want to change energy expenditure or physical activity, everything else changes, okay? So what can we learn from that? Let's start out with the question I hear all the time. Which is more important in obesity, diet or physical activity? If you ask that question, you don't understand energy balance. The answer is yes. Both are important, okay? And I'm going to try to show you that. A couple of years ago, I was distressed to see this cover of Time magazine, The Myth of Exercise. Oh my gosh. Of course it's good for you, but it won't make you lose weight. It's what you eat that really counts. These people do not understand energy balance. So what I'm going to try to convince you is this is totally wrong, a wrong conclusion, okay? So their argument is, well, when you exercise, you just eat more. So it doesn't matter. You can go out and exercise. You're just going to eat more. It's going to have no effect on your weight. Maybe good for other things that Chip told you about. Is that true? Well, here's what we know about energy balance. This is a cartoon based on a lot of work from John Mayer in the 1950s. And I think this will help us understand that. So if you're up here, let's put it in perspective. Here's the increase in physical activity. Here's energy intake, and here's body weight. Okay, this is a cartoon, theoretical. So if you're over here, what happens? You're in the regulated zone. You're active. So your physical activity is very much tied to your intake. So as physical activity changes, you adjust food intake, and your weight stays exactly the same, just as Time magazine said happens. Okay? But most of America's down here. They aren't up here being active. Chip just told you how many people meet our guidelines. Now, if you're down here, the system works totally different. So as your activity goes down, rather than go down, food intake actually goes up, okay? So the idea is there's some theoretical threshold, and the good news is this is not running marathons. As Chip said, going from here to here is increasing activity a little bit. When you're here, your biology is working with you to maintain weight. When you're down here, it isn't. Now, when we do, there are lots of studies where people increase physical activity down here. What happens to food intake? Goes down. Occasionally, somebody will go up. But in almost everybody in every study, when you add activity, food intake does not go up. It goes down, and people lose weight. So unless we can get people in this regulated zone, There's no way we're going to manage obesity with food intake alone. Very few, almost nobody, can achieve energy balance at a healthy weight being sedentary. Our bodies were meant to move, and when we stop moving, bad things happen. We've got to think differently around this. The normal state is being active. The abnormal state is being physically inactive, and we do a lot of our studies with inactive people. Okay? What happens when you start moving? Your muscles change, your insulin sensitivity changes, your metabolism changes in a way to set you up for weight gain. Your appetite is no longer tied to your energy expenditure. So when you're in the regulated zone, you eat to match your level of expenditure. When you're in the unregulated zone, it's no longer coupled. So your body's not working with you, it's working against you in maintaining weight. Here's another way to illustrate that. In this slide, I raised the concept of flux. Flux just means energy through the system. So as human beings, we achieve energy balance better at high flux than low flux. We achieve energy balance when we're eating a lot and expending a lot. That seems to be the natural state. And let me illustrate this. So here's sort of go back 4 or 5 generations when everybody lived on the farm. You had to be very active. So energy expenditure was high, not because we went to exercise, because we had to get through the day. So you ate a lot. The challenge was eating enough to meet this high level of physical activity. Okay, this is that regulated system. Things work really well here. So what happens over time? We become inactive. Now what we're trying to say is, let's tell the population to eat less. Let's take these people with low energy expenditure, and let's take all of our strategies toward people eating less. I think we've got decades of research showing that doesn't work. The reason is, as energy expenditure goes down, we get hungry. Our appetite is so strong. When I give this talk, people say, oh, you're giving a short shrift to food intake. Just the opposite. Our appetites are so strong that we can't eat less. This is an unsustainable situation. This is how we're trying to manage obesity today, telling people to eat less to match a low level of energy expenditure. Some people can do anything, but for most people, this is entirely impossible. So what happens in most cases is we eat a little more, we gain weight, and guess what? Gaining weight increases our energy expenditure, gets us back to that high flux level. So here's the simple message here. Your body works best when you have a lot of energy coming through. You expend a lot and you eat a lot. You can get there in 2 ways. You can exercise or you can become obese. Okay? So obesity now is an adaptation to the environment. So in an environment where there's food around and you don't have to be very active, if you're not moving, your body is going to gain weight as a mechanism to allow it to achieve energy balance. So if we want to reduce obesity, we're going to have to replace it with physical activity. Again, I'm not saying food isn't important, it's critically important, but we cannot, as a population, achieve energy balance at a healthy weight being sedentary. Now, a couple of other things related to that. John Ferret talked about small changes. I'm a real big believer in small changes. If you want to produce weight loss and get people back to ideal body weight, that takes big changes to do. You can achieve some weight loss with smaller changes, but it takes real big changes to keep weight off. And we're very good at this. I'll give anybody in this room money-back guarantee on weight loss, but I can't give you a money-back guarantee on weight maintenance. Most people who lose weight gain it back because they can't sustain the behaviors needed to keep this off. If you look at people who do succeed, what's the #1 predictor of success? Physical activity, okay? But here's where small changes can really play a role. The average American over the past few years has gained about 1 pound a year. Okay, you all have scales under your chair, so we're measuring you to see how you've done. That's equal to about an extra 15 calories a day. 15 calories per day, okay? So we're gaining weight because over time we're gradually eating a little more than we expend. If we could make small changes to stop weight gain so that every single person weighs the same next year as this year, we could do that with small behavior changes. Over time, we gradually reduce obesity rates. So I'm a big believer in this because small changes, common sense, are much more feasible than big changes. So I think we have to understand energy balance to understand the factors that play a role in body weight. It's both food and physical activity, and they're inseparable. It would be like me saying, I want to estimate your net worth, but I only know you're only interested in your income. Okay? You can't separate the two. You can't separate intake from expenditure. Both are critical, but if we want to keep people as sedentary as they are right now, the only option is to become obese to achieve energy balance. Physical activity is more than burning calories, and that's where people make a mistake. They say, oh, I went out and ran a mile and I only burned a couple hundred calories and I can go buy the fast food and make that up real easy. It's way more than burning calories. It's getting your biology to work with you. It's getting your metabolism set up to burn fat rather than store fat. Prevention is ultimately going to be more feasible than treatment, and we have to put a lot of our efforts toward prevention, and small changes are what people can do. Now, I hear this all the time, eat less and exercise more. This is so wrong message. This is the wrong message. I will defy you to show me any population that's eating less and maintaining a normal body weight. We have to change this to move more and eat smarter. We increase physical activity. We look at things like energy density and portion size and fat and sugar. This is the way we're going to achieve energy balance. Food restriction doesn't work. Food is critical, but unless we increase exercise in the population, we have no hope of reducing high rates of obesity. Thank you.